Welcome back to Pack the Rock podcast, brought to you by the Hoosier Network. I'm your host, Audrey Marr, and I'm joined by Kylee Corman and Carlo Barone. In our second episode of this season, we'll be covering everything you need to know from the Ohio State game and giving you our predictions for this Friday's game versus Indiana State. Well, let's get right into it. Indiana opened up their season with a loss against the number 3 team in the nation, Ohio State, with a final score of 23-3. Now, while the outcome may not have come as a shock, the score surprised many. I mean, what were your overall thoughts from the games?
I don't think anyone would disagree by saying the defense was good and the offense was bad. I think that's what it can pretty much be boiled down to.
I think the game was a lot closer than people thought. 23 points is the best defensive standing they've had against Ohio State since like the 90s. And considering the game in November was, I think they put 50 on us, I think that's a lot better. Now, 3 points isn't good at all, but it was a lot closer than people thought. And, I mean, it was really a game until the third quarter.
Yeah, I think the defense and the transfers definitely shined. I think the offense definitely has a lot of work to do. It looked a lot like last season, where it was just straight running the ball and not really a lot of quarterback, I don't know, you know what I mean. But it just wasn't looking as good as people were hoping, but the defense definitely shined. And I mean, there was a lot that obviously stood out about Indiana in this game, but who would you say each of you stood out to you in the game?
I mean, there's an obvious answer, and it's probably Aaron Casey. Tom Allen mentioned yesterday he was the best defensive player on the field. I mean, he was blowing up. He was great in the run game. He had so many stops. He led the team in tackles, had 11 on the day. I mean, he showed why he was voted as the George Salfaro Award winner for the second year and a captain this year. He simply was IU's best player on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, you can't say that Aaron Casey wasn't, but Andre Carter, he was amazing. There was a video going around on Twitter of Kyle McCord, and it was like Ohio State fans saying, like, if he would have done this, like, they would have scored, whatever. But at the end of the day, it was really just an Andre Carter highlight, holding back 2 guys. Honorable mentions have to go to Kobe Minor, 6 tackles. He held Marvin Harrison Jr. to 18 yards, which I don't think that will happen again this season.
No.
And his dad posted on Twitter that he had been really sick. So shout out to him. Lewis Moore, 6 tackles. Phillip Dunham, he had that interception, which all the coaches said, yeah, honestly, we weren't really surprised by that. He does it every day in practice, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a lot of playmakers on the defense.
I agree with you guys. I think Aaron Casey and Phillip Dunham I both had down, but also Jacob Magnum-Farrar. He had 5 total tackles, 2 passes deflected. I mean, these are names that we haven't heard of, and I think going into this season, they're names that people have to watch out for, and I think definitely everyone shined on the defense. It was hard to pick anyone on the offense.
I don't know if I'd say everyone. There were a few people that I was expecting a little bit more out of. Noah Pierre, I mean, I get it. It's the first game of the season. There's a lot going on. A very tough wide receiver core, but I was expecting his name to pop up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree. Offense was really hard to judge because they just did not have anything going, but partly I feel like that was due because they had 2 quarterbacks in, and like they mentioned after the game, they couldn't really tell who was going to go in and when. I mean, they pulled Sorsby after 2 series, and they didn't see him the rest of the half. So it's hard to get a rhythm when you don't really know who's going to be throwing you the ball or what their strengths are, because both of them have similar but different skill sets. So
I don't think the offense not being super successful is completely on any one person, any one player either. I think it could have been called a lot better. Even Walbell said he played pitter-patter too long, if you will, which I agree. I mean, I understand you're trying to limit turnovers, especially when it's against Ohio State. You got to make as little mistakes as possible, but there was absolutely no risks being taken, I don't think.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, talking about the quarterbacks, both got equal playing time, but from what you guys saw, even though it wasn't a special performance on offense, did anyone stick out to you or separate themselves from the other?
No.
After the game, I really wouldn't have said no, but looking at some of the tape, which sounds cringe to say, but I've watched a few highlights since, and Sorsby's got a better arm than I thought. Or at least he had a better passing day than I thought. I know the yards weren't there, but some of the throws weren't necessarily his fault. Like, Bell talked about how there was some miscommunications between receivers running the wrong routes or the protection breaking down. Not all of it was his fault, but I'll say this. After watching that, I think Sorbsby is going to eventually win the job.
I don't know. I think Sorsby definitely has the arm. Taven is more of the running quarterback, which I feel like that's kind of what Indiana wants. I don't know.
Bell wants.
I don't know if it's what they need. I don't know if that's what they should want, but that is what they want. But in order to separate themselves, I said this in our game recap discussion, whatever, they both need to take notes from each other. And, like, if there was a mix between the both of them, I think
they would turn into that Washington quarterback that's really good.
Yeah, what's his name?
I forgot.
Shoot, I forgot.
But can we talk about this for a second? Okay, so there's all this drama. They're both going to start the first 2 games. We're going to test them. 2 different opponents. This is such a big deal. It's been the storyline this whole preseason, this whole season. Is Dexter not going to be the starting quarterback in like 2 or 3 weeks? Maybe 4 weeks, maybe a month.
I
this
think
much drama for just to be like...
I think right now, Dexter Williams his injury is uncertain. No one knows if he's... Whenever he gets in the game, if he's 100% healthy and he can go on to be the starting quarterback Indiana needs. But I think right now the hype was around Brendan Sorsby, Taven Jackson, that they can't go into the discussion of Dexter Williams yet until he's thrown in the game.
I don't know how uncertain the Dexter thing is. I think it's uncertain to us as outsiders, as media, and to the fans. I think inside the team doctors, Dexter, the actual team, I think they have a better idea. But I'm just... so much effort is going into this quarterback battle, and it's kind of baffling to me. Like, you're not going to have a good offense because, okay, Taven starts this week. They get equal playing time. They're all similar in their own ways, and I think Bell said something about it the other day about how they don't really need to have too much of a different offensive plan, but it just feels like a lot of whiplash for the offense. Like, it seems a little crazy. Because, okay, yeah, you got your starter this week, and then you'll have a starter for maybe 2 weeks, and then it's Dexter. Like, it just seems like a lot.
I feel like Dexter is an interesting case because, you guys saw he dressed on Saturday, full pads, warmed up and everything, but was inactive.
Let's note he was inactive.
Kylie, I know you know he knows. I know you know that he was inactive, whatever. But it will be interesting because if they continue to struggle and he's ready, like, Allen would probably throw him in right away because maybe a week or two he's technically active and then he plays. But if they don't get much better, like this week is going to be hard to tell because it's Indiana State. It's not really a Big Ten opponent. But by the non-conference, like the end of it, when they get to Maryland as their next game, if they're still unsure or like it's close, you better believe Dexter's probably going to go in. Because the whole reason that they even got a second Big Ten win last year was his first start, and he played outstanding. And people also forget, he only threw 2 passes that day. So that just because Dexter goes in doesn't mean he's the most prolific passer, but I think he's more prepared in this offense than the other two, especially if they're still struggling in a month from now.
I think we always need to keep in mind, though, that he did have a very serious injury, and something in him changed regardless. Like, he's not going to come out onto that field and be the exact same quarterback that he was at Michigan State, at Purdue, which can be a good thing. All the rehab, you can become stronger, but also you can play scared. There's just a lot of factors that you need to think about.
I mean, kind of going along with what Carlos said, Dexter Williams is used to this offense, and the offense is used to him. So I think, especially Cam Camper, I mean, you could tell he was frustrated after the game. We don't know why, but he was. And I think...
Well...
but
I think we probably know why.
I feel like when you've got like 80 passing yards in the game, I'd be frustrated too. With a guy with him, who's pretty good, and he played better than I thought he was going to for the week one.
Yeah, I agree.
I would be frustrated too.
Yeah, but I think, going off of that, I think that these couple weeks, Tom Allen said that they want to, in a couple weeks, go with one quarterback. No one's thinking of the name Dexter Williams, but I think they're going to go with Dexter Williams once he's healthy. Like, everyone's just assuming Sorsby and Jackson. Dexter Williams is not in the mix. And I think that's why they're leaving it to be such a mystery. I think he starts whenever he's healthy.
But I think that's, like, known. I don't know.
Carlo?
I really hate to say this, but if you look at IU's quarterback the last 3 years, even when Penix was playing out of his mind, they've played and started multiple people the last 3 seasons. So Taven's going to start this week, Swarsby last week. I mean, just based off their injury luck and the way that the team is run, I mean, their offensive line played well, only 1 sack, which is honestly really encouraging to see because last season, I mean, there was a game they gave up 7 sacks to Michigan. You're not going to win any game giving up 7 sacks unless you're Joe Burrow against the Titans, which I don't know how that happened, but that's besides the point. I don't know. That was a crazy playoff game, but besides the point, they've had different guys in every season that I really can remember. Even the 2020 season when they were football lore in Bloomington, they still started Jack Tuttle and Penix, and they both ended up getting hurt, and they lost their bowl game. People forget, but they did lose that bowl game to Ole Miss.
People forget.
Oh, people talk about that season like they're the 85 Bears. Shout out to all my Bears fans that love talking about that season because it'll never go away. And the Cowboys fans that still live in the 90s. All right, I'm done.
And the Indiana basketball fans.
Oh, yeah, those two.
Just Indiana fans. But, okay, moving on. A big trend in the game was the defense barely getting any time to rest. I mean, the offense just couldn't show up. They had basically most of the game 3-and-outs. So what did you guys see from the offense as a whole on Saturday, and what do you think needs to change in order for the team to be successful?
But you got to throw the ball.
Mm-hmm. That's
you
a start.
cannot. I think Indiana has a fairly decent running back room. They overutilize it. Every single time Jalen Lucas had the ball, I think I was saying, how is he going to stay healthy throughout the whole season? Really hope he does, obviously.
I mean, he was cramping already, assuming he was cramping midway through the game, and he was being mostly used for being a running back. I mean, I think we saw him at running back more than we saw Josh Henderson. So I think they're using him. I don't want to say the word abusing him, but in a way they are. And there's no way that he can.
I feel like they were trying to use Josh Henderson as how they kind of did last year, and that worked for them, where he was one of the bigger running backs in the group, and he could power through those people. But when you're putting him in at 3rd and 5 to get that 4th down against all these future NFL defensive linemen, that doesn't quite match up. So you have to have other options because this is not the last time I know everyone's talking, this is Ohio State, and we'll see how this Ohio State team ends up being. It's a little really too early to tell, but Michigan's a good freaking team, and Indiana has to go up against them. Penn State, Ohio State was not the end-all be-all, so you have to figure out how are you going to work around these bigger guys, because not everyone's Indiana State, not everyone's Akron. And you got to be bold. If you're so worried about turnovers, which I'm assuming that's why they didn't throw the ball, you're not advancing. So what's it matter? Take some risks, which I think this week against Indiana State is an amazing opportunity for them to do that.
The only way that I would feel a lot better about the passing game is if one of these quarterbacks goes and throws for 200 yards. Because both of them are still going to play, but they should have enough time where if they're rolling, they can get something going. But honestly, if they can't really throw, if they can't throw against Indiana State, there are going to be some issues. A lot of issues if they can't throw against a team that's barely Division I.
I think they can throw, but I think that
you're a Division I quarterback.
Yeah.
I would
hope you can throw.
I would sure hope.
But I don't think that they choose to do that. I don't know why. No one knows why. But I think that from the two of them, from what I saw, I think Brendan Sorsby has the most potential to get 200 yards or something like that. But from what I saw more potential in Brendan at the game than I did in Taven, which we saw against Ohio State. We'll see more this week. But I don't know. I think that they need to change their offensive plan in order to be successful. Majorly.
I will say that Indiana State lost 27, I believe it was 27-0 against Eastern Illinois last week. They had 2 wins last season. This is the time for the Indiana offense to play around with their tools that they have. Mm-hmm. If you are not throwing it this week, you're never going to throw it.
Yeah.
At all.
Literally ever.
Like, what secondary, with all due respect to Indiana State, what secondary will be worse that they will play the rest of the season than this week?
Maybe Akron? I don't know. I haven't done that much research in Akron.
I mean, I would say, I haven't done research on Akron either, but they're both kind of in a similar spot in the college football atmosphere. If you can't throw against them, you can't really throw the ball at all. And going back to Jalen Lucas, if they're giving him, they said yesterday in the presser, they're planning on giving him 20 touches a game. Jeez. That is, like, I understand he's probably your best, or one of the best offensive skill players, and every time he gets the ball, like, he going down the sidelines for an 80-yard touchdown. But, I mean, he's not the biggest guy, and if he gets hit hard by, like, a safety out of nowhere or a linebacker, like, it could be a long season for him. I mean, that man, I had one of my friends used to play basketball, and every time that he would go up for a layup, he used to be a smaller guy, he'd end up on the floor. And the bumps and bruises on him were a lot. And just thinking about that as a middle school basketball player versus a D1 college football player, I can't even imagine what Jalen Lucas is going through just to even make it to 12 games.
Yeah, I mean, and he's used to being the smaller guy on the field. He played in Louisiana, like, he's used to it. He's played a year of college football. I don't think, obviously, his size is a factor. It's always a factor. But I think, more importantly, this is your time to develop your tools. You have E.J. Williams. You have Cam Camper, Christian Turner, Josh Henderson. All these people very capable of making plays. Do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
They have skill players that are talented.
Right.
Cam Camper is a wide receiver 1 for most teams in the Big Ten, when healthy, I will say. The running backs, they've got 3 guys that offer very different skill sets. They have the players. And now their offensive line's playing well. There's only one position that they need to work on.
Yeah, I feel it.
The most obvious one on the field.
This game last weekend kind of made me feel stupid because the clip that we put out on social media was like, I'm excited for these offensive skill players, which I still am. But we really did not see that at all.
You can't do anything if you can't get them the ball.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, we saw the offense that we were seeing last year, which, I mean, it brought Indiana fans to leave during the third quarter. I think people were getting a little bit of deja vu. And that's just, I don't know, that's something that obviously needs to change. But let's move on to the other side of the field. Let's get into this defense. I mean, the new addition of Macchieri seems to have worked, but do we think that Ohio State maybe didn't show up, or is it that this defense has finally found its system?
Honestly, I was more impressed by Indiana defense than the Ohio State offense. The Ohio State offense didn't necessarily have a good game either, but Indiana's defense, I mean, they had 4 3-and-outs. Ohio State's offense had 4 3-and-outs against Indiana's defense. It doesn't matter who you're playing. If you have 4 3-and-outs in a game, that's pretty good, because that's 4 possessions right back to your offense. And if Indiana scores a touchdown on literally one of them, this is a completely different game. But the defense got tired in the second half, and they ended up losing it. But they played Ohio State well, and you got to think, with all the 3-and-outs that Indiana was having, they're playing Ohio State, who's bigger, more physical than them. They're getting off the field for like 90 seconds, and then they're going right back on. It almost feels like a track workout where you got like a minute off, and then you're going right back on. And eventually, you're gonna run out of gas, and that's what happened.
I think going back to your question, I think it's a little bit of both. We're not going to know until later in the season, like I said earlier, when we can really compare numbers to other teams. But Ohio State was only held to 25 or under 3 times last year. Travion Henderson only had 47 yards. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 18 yards. Emeka Egbuka had 16 yards. I don't know if those numbers will happen again this year, which you have to consider that Ohio State was dealing with the quarterback battle themselves, which, again, I said it last week, an Ohio State quarterback is still an Ohio State quarterback. Who was an Ohio State backup quarterback? Joe Burrow, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So I don't think that necessarily means as much as it would to, like, Indiana, but this is still very much a true NFL caliber team. Like if you know what I'm referencing, I think the defense looked really good. Again, did they look good, or was it Ohio State? I think it's a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ohio State definitely didn't have their best day, but they...
I don't think that should discount the Indiana defense.
Not to mention, if you match up the Indiana defense versus the Ohio State offense, just purely based on recruiting, it's not close.
Right.
So it should be a landslide by one end to the other, but in fact, Indiana played a lot better than a lot of people thought. And honestly, I left that game feeling a lot better about their defense than not. Because last year, if they would have times where their offense would do this, and then they would also have times the same game where their defense would give up 40 points. Cincinnati had almost 30 in the first half last year. I mean, it's a blowout by halftime, and you're playing your second-string guys to start the third. But this year, since their defense is good, they're going to be a lot more games than last year. And Alan talked about ton about how they've had so many one-score games in the fourth quarter. And when you have a defense like this holding your first Big Ten opponent in your first game to 23 when they average over 30 every single year is a win in that point. But their offense played so bad, but they don't really have a chance to win this game. But I do think their defense is going to keep them in a lot more games going forward.
I think energy is a huge thing. And that comes from everywhere. That comes from on the field. That comes from fans. And you can't rely on your fans, especially Indiana football fans. There's no football culture here.
Not at all.
And that's fine. There's never going to be. You're going to have to learn to go beyond that. But I don't know how you guys felt. At halftime, the teams had not even come back out on the field. It felt dark. It felt draining. Like, I was tired. I was like, I'm ready to go home. And you could just feel that energy. I'm a big energy person, and you could totally feel that. I could have told you at halftime, there was just not. No one was hyped up. The defense was tired. The offense was tired.
The fans were leaving the stadium.
The fans had been at the bars since 4 a.m. They were tired. And it was hot. Like, I understand. Yeah. It was a long day for everyone. First football game. But this is, again, another problem that Indiana has struggled with. They struggled with it last year, and that goes back to losing in the fourth quarter. They just cannot find a way to maintain that energy. And if they can do that, that's going to help them a lot. I don't know where you get that from, though, because you're not getting it from the fans. Did you have something to say? You looked like you had something to say.
I did not have anything to say. I just thought it was a good point where, I mean, people are leaving by halftime, and it was a one-score game against the number 3 team in the nation.
It's crazy.
Why? Like, the football nerd in me would have stayed. Now, I'm not at Kilroy's at 5 a.m. See, I feel like we have 2 completely different days, but the football fan in me would have loved it. It doesn't really matter who's playing. If some unranked opponent is going against number 3 and it's a one-score game, my eyes are on the TV or at the game, wherever. But, yeah, that was crazy that many people left, and Twitter was in shambles because of it.
It was.
My dad always told me, shout out, Dad, I know you're listening, you stay till the last second of the game.
Respect.
And there is one game that I can remember that I left, and that was, I guess it would be my freshman year? No, sophomore year Ohio State game. It was pouring down rain. It was absolute slaughter, and I did go home. I did watch it on the TV, but that was the one game in my whole life of all sports, well, for most sports, that I can remember I left before 0-0.
Oh,
I will say, last year for Idaho, when it was torrential downpour walking in, it was fun. I feel like even if I can't say that standing in 100 degrees in the sun is fun, but in the rain in a football game, I feel like more than half the people left the stands, and it wasn't even kickoff yet. But it was fun to actually be a kickoff.
A rain game.
It's actually fun.
One of the best football games I ever went to was Michigan State, pouring down rain, freezing cold, horrible weather. So much fun.
I had my clothes in the dryer for a straight week.
I've definitely ruined a few pairs of shoes.
But it was fun regardless. Okay, so moving on. I mean, this past week, we came up with our predictions for this season on a football roundtable. Make sure to check it out. Specifically, we made our picks for Defensive Player of the Year. I put Aaron Casey, Carlo, you put Andre Carter, and Kylee, you put Noah Pierre. From what you saw, at the game, has your opinion changed at all, or did anyone else stick out to you?
I'll go ahead and say my defensive player of the week is Aaron Casey. I feel like that's already been decided. I still want to see more from Noah Pierre. We've seen some things from him last year. He really has had to step up into this leadership role, and I know he's embracing that. He talked about that. He told me, he said something about how he feels like the other captains are more verbal leaders, and he wants to lead by action. And I want to see that. Let's see it, because I fully believe that he has that in him. But then let's see it.
I will say, defensive backs a different way to look at it, their performance, because if you don't hear their name, usually they're doing a good job.
Right.
I'm not going to say he had the best day, don't get me wrong, but we didn't hear a lot about him, which is usually good. And we also didn't hear a lot about Marvin Harrison because, he also got hurt. I'm sure they wanted to maybe caution him back a little bit, but
I don't know.
But
he was back out there. I don't know.
I picked Andre Carter because I picked Aaron Casey for the MVP as well. Mm-hmm. But I do think Andre Carter will probably be 1A, 1B with Aaron Casey for Defensive Player of the Year on this team. And he showed it. The first game in a new system, just joined the team, and he's already making plays, throwing Ohio State running backs in the backfield by himself. That's impressive for a guy that probably is still learning the playbook to some extent versus the Aaron Casey who's been here for a couple of years now, which knows this defense like the back of his hand. So if you go with raw talent, it's probably Andre Carter because you guys have seen him. He's huge. He could literally eat me. But I think he probably is going to stay as my Defensive Player of the Year, but I think Aaron Casey will be the best player on the team.
Yeah, I put Aaron Casey just because you put him for MVP, so I had to switch it up. But I still have to go with it. Aaron Casey, he had, 11 total tackles, 9 solo, and 1 tackle for loss. He was all over the field, and there wasn't one drive where he was bad, I feel like. Maybe I'm biting my words, but he definitely stood out. I think I said in my roundtable that him and Aaron Casey and Andre Carter are going to be the 1-2 punch on the defense, and I wholeheartedly still agree with that. I don't know. I think in a game as big as Ohio State, they showed up when they needed to, and not saying that they have a walk in the park for the rest of the schedule, but I think that they'll be able to show up for those big games for Michigan, Penn State, all of those games. I don't know. I think they definitely have the potential. I'm still going to stick with my Defensive Player of the Year, Andre Carter, MVP, sticking with that as well. But moving on, Indiana State next week. Indiana will face Indiana State this upcoming Friday at Memorial Stadium at 7 p.m. We're just going to go through some quick predictions, but make sure to tune in later this week for a more in-depth analysis on the game and a preview of Week 2. And it should definitely be exciting to see this defense again on Friday. But do we think that this offense is going to pick up? Will Walt Bell maybe be moving away from the running game on Friday, or are you sticking to the roots?
I think you have to. This is, like I said it before, this is your perfect opportunity to take some risks. You can count on your defense, rely on your defense a little bit. Don't overdo it, but be okay with if you throw it and it doesn't work out, it's 3 and out, that's fine. You make a mistake, there's a turnover, whatever. Get it on the next play. You have to do a little bit more experimenting here, and I do think that both Allen and Bell know this. I want to see way more, from what I want to see way more wide receivers, and I love him, I want to see a lot less Jalen Lucas.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. For this game.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Wholeheartedly, absolutely.
He does not need 20 touches against Indiana State.
No way.
I think you could probably cut that in half and give him 10, including his returns. So I think they need to throw it, and if they don't, you can run the ball, they can win. That's great, but trying that against Big Ten opponents is not going to work. They need to throw it, and I feel like now, kind of what Kylie was saying, is the perfect opportunity to figure out what passing plays Sorsby or Jackson likes and what could work and what could be those bread and butter plays when it's 3rd and 5 in the fourth quarter against Maryland and you need a first down to win the game. Maybe you use that play against Indiana State that got you an 80-yard touchdown. Maybe it'd be like, we could give this play to him because we probably know he's going to hit it if it's the right coverage. So I think they have to throw it, and if they don't, they're probably going to get a win here. I would hope so. It's a FCS program. They're probably going to get the win. Why not experiment and figure out the identity of your offense?
If I'm Taven or Storsby, I'm calling the audible. I'm throwing it. Take advantage. Take advantage of the opportunity. Be bold. Make your own choices.
4 verticals.
Not saying completely go against your coaching, but this is their opportunity. Alan said neither of them stood out. And they both did fine, whatever. But if I'm hearing that my coach is saying that I did fine and I didn't stick out, I am making sure that I do something the next time to stand out. This is a good opportunity. So I want to see big plays from both of them.
Throwing it out there, is there any chance that we see Dexter Williams thrown in?
I don't think I don't think so.
I don't think so, but I would only say no because I think he's going to be inactive. If he's active, which I don't think he will be, but if he is, absolutely.
I don't know if you want to throw him in yet.
I think it's too early, though.
Yeah.
I don't think...
I feel like if it's a complete blowout, we might see him for at least one drive. Possibly. I feel like this might be the game to do it because...
I would leave him inactive.
It's possible, but if he was already dressed for Ohio State, inactive but dressed, now they have Indiana State, Louisville, Akron. I don't think we'll see him for Louisville, but I think if they want to see how he is on the field right now, I feel like this is the game to do it for at least one drive.
And if they keep him inactive, which they probably will, in my opinion, then Akron will probably be the next time where
I'm feeling Akron
really hone down and be like, he might play. But I mean, I feel like that was one of the most interesting developments that no one talked about was him being dressed, but inactive. So he didn't play.
I still feel like that's a pretty key thing of information, but I don't know. But yeah, I mean, no one's really talking about it. It's just all the Taven Sorsby. It's fine, though.
All right. Lastly, let's go over our score predictions. I'll head to you first, Carlo.
Hard to predict this one. I know I'm gonna take Indiana to win, but their offense is a huge question because we don't know what they're gonna do. I think I think this is gonna be a runaway game, and honestly, their defense played well enough. I will go 27-0. IU.
Same score?
What do you mean?
That
Eastern Illinois?
Yeah, Eastern Illinois. Okay, Kylie.
Honestly, I was gonna say 27-2, but I thought about that. I'm going a little crazy here. I'm saying they shut him out. Would be their first shutout since 2020. I'm saying 37-0.
Oh my
God.
Wow.
But because of the defense. I'm thinking the defense is scoring here. Last game against Eastern Illinois, there were 2 pick sixes. Indiana's defense looked very good. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some fumbles returned, interceptions returned, especially if they're saying Dunham's doing that every single day at practice. This sounds like the perfect team for him. So I do think it will be a more high-scoring game than Indiana has maybe seen in the past. I think a good portion of the points will come from the defense, however.
Yeah, I was going to go with 21-0, but thinking of that, I think the defense will definitely score something. So I'm going to go 28-0. I think the defense will definitely show up like they need to. We don't know what this offense is going to look like, if they're going to try new things, if it'll be successful. But I think it'll be half and half on scoring. So we'll see. But thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of Pack the Rod podcast. Make sure to keep up with the Hoosier Network on Instagram, X now, not Twitter, Spotify, and for all your Indiana athletic updates. I've been Audrey Marr alongside Kylee Corman and Carlo Barone. We'll be at the game this Friday for everything you need to know, and we'll see you next week.